Alrighty, welcome everyone. My guest today has spent close to 3 decades in Australian tech. Fun fact, in the late 90s, he was writing code in the web arm of a company called Sausage Software, the Aussie.com darling, briefly worth close to $1 billion, I believe. He spent 11 years running the tech behind Yellow Pages and White Pages. Then at Origin Energy, he helped run a massive migration, moving more than 4 million customers onto a new platform. Then almost 3 years ago, he walked away from it all. He walked away from the big end of town and started his own consultancy. You guys might have heard of it. It's called Revity over in Melbourne. And the thing that really interests me is the man who spent nearly 2 decades running tech inside corporate Australia now tells me that as a country, we're 2 to 3 years behind on AI adoption at scale. And in his view, getting meaningful value from AI means completely redesigning, number one, how companies are built, two, how they're structured, and three, how we actually think about the roles themselves. So today, I want to find out why we're behind and what it takes for us to catch up. Evgueni, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. And yeah, thanks for having me. And thanks for mentioning the 30 years. And I'd say it makes me feel quite old or wise.
All righty, should we get into the first question?
Let's do it. Yes.
Okay, so you mentioned to me before that you think Australia is probably 2 to 3 years behind AI adoption at scale. Who are we behind, and what does that gap really look like?
And so I spent quite a bit of time looking and working with Australian companies, but also looking overseas, from United States to Europe to China to Russia, and seeing where the countries are at. And seeing what the organizations do within those countries, but also what the government policies are when it comes to AI. I think when we look at the adoption of AI, we almost need to look in a two-dimensional space. And we'll start with one dimension, and one dimension is the size of the company. So if we're talking startups, one-man bands, or one-person bands, then the startups are quite, I wouldn't say mature, but very enthusiastic about AI adoption. I've met a lot of founders, especially in the last few weeks, that are essentially one-person founder who is now able to build an MVP, a minimal viable product themselves. Like they don't really need a development team to do it because they can just use AI tools to vibe code, at least a prototype or at least an initial version of the software. So for them, they can use the AI tools. I think they're very enthusiastic. What is slowing them down is the availability of the APIs from the packages that their target market is using. Right? We'll come back to that. So I think startups, adoption, pretty good. I think they're very enthusiastic. What's slowing them down is probably more of the context of the environment that they're working in. Then we get into medium-sized companies, or either scale-ups or medium-sized companies that don't necessarily have their own IT team, internal IT team, and they either have to rely on a managed service provider that they outsource the IT to, or they only have a very small technical team. I think for them, the ability to adopt AI and make it part of the organization is much greater because they have a lot more control. They have some technical skills in-house that is actually able to implement some of those AI solutions. And they have a financial ability to bring in expertise, either local or overseas, when they need to. And the more the size of the company is, and the more budget they sort of allocate towards that technical things, the more ability they have to actually make AI have meaningful or contribute in a meaningful way to their business. And they're still small enough to be able to move fast. They're not going to slow down by the bureaucracy. And then when you get into the big end of town, I think if I compare that to other countries, they are the ones that are really behind. And not everyone is the same. There's some companies that are quite advanced compared to other companies in probably in the same vertical or in the same geographical space. They have the technical expertise to be able to do it. They have the funding and the financial resources to actually have to actually implement it. What makes it difficult for them is the environment that they operate in. And it could be compliance, could be regulatory, could be just the risk appetite that they have. And I guess a lot of companies, especially the large ones in Australia, the risk appetite for them is very, very low, which basically means that they're not able to, to try to put something out there, learn from it, and then improve and learn again. They're kind of like almost trying to do it in a traditional way where you have to get it perfect before you put it in front of the customer. So I think when you look at it from those one dimension, startups going really reasonably well. I think the medium companies progressing reasonably well. The large ones, they're kind of falling behind. And then on another dimension, you look at the different functions of the business. Right. So if you look at IT teams, even within Australia, they're actually quite advanced. A lot of companies invested into the AI development tools. A lot of developers themselves are very enthusiastic and we're trying to do different things. And that's probably where most of the investment over the last probably 12 to 18 months has really gone into. What hasn't moved yet to full AI adoption or haven't really seen the AI benefits are the other functions of the business that have traditionally not had much to do with the technology. So you look at teams like regulatory and compliance, legal teams, finance, kind of like payroll, marketing. I guess marketing is probably more advanced than the other teams. Procurement, that's probably another example. So those more traditional kind of functions within businesses, they haven't really started to adopt AI in a way that actually makes meaningful difference to how they work and what benefit they get. So yes, it's kind of like two-dimensional. It's almost like a matrix. And some teams are moving faster than other teams. And other teams are kind of like moving as fast as they can be.
Got it. And is there a particular example that kind of paints this picture really well? For example, is there a company in the US or China, and when you compare it to the Aussie equivalent, it's just night and day?
I'll probably use Russia as an example. And Russia, despite being heavily sanctioned and restricted from really innovating at pace, within the country, they have examples of, let's say, Ozone Wildberries, which is an equivalent of Amazon. And the voice bots for customer service have been around and been used by them for the last probably year and a half, maybe 2 years. And they've already been using it at scale. And what I've seen there is that the customers themselves are more used to talking to a voice bot, to AI, and actually quite accepting of it because the issues get resolved much faster. And they can get escalated to humans. So they kind of like get handed over to a human when it needs to be. And customers value the speed of resolution for many cases higher than trying to talk to a human for every single issue. So I think that's one example. Their banking, like the banks, a couple of banks in Russia, like Sber, is quite a good example where when you call them or you use the app, quite a lot of the interactions actually happens with AI, Gen AI, not the traditional, scripted scenario-based chatbots. And again, the experience from a customer perspective is actually not human equivalent, but close enough to human-like experience where people are really, accepting of it. So that's probably a couple of examples. I mean, China is even more advanced, and I think AI there kind of works not just in the digital space but also physical space as well. I mean, things like robots, delivery robots. Like in Moscow, I've seen a few, and it's quite fine. Like people not surprised by them anymore. They just like running around and driving around. But in China, it's almost like on the next scale. So yeah, so I think there's probably a couple of examples I could use to compare to what we have here and where we're gonna need to go over the next few years.
Because I was just talking, the last guest that I had on, he was talking about the Commonwealth Bank pilot. I think it was in their call centers. I think it was 45 people or something they got rid of and tried to implement AI, but it, for some reason, it didn't work for them. So it kind of gets me wondering, is it, obviously one of the things that's stopping us from catching up is the compliance aspect, but then there's also, are we just incompetent? Like why didn't something like that work?
I think the where it works really well is for product companies that are used to releasing a small feature, getting customer feedback, and then improving on it. So if you think about Dropbox, for example, how Dropbox went live, they didn't implement everything that Dropbox has right now. They kind of started with like a really, really small subset of the features. And I'm seeing that quite often, especially for the larger companies with, let's say, AI's voice bots, they're kind of trying to cover many different scenarios and many different edge cases instead of sort of going live with one scenario, having a really good experience for the customer where the handover from AI to human happens. So it doesn't feel like, and I'm sure you've experienced the same thing, like you go on a chatbot, you try to chat with the chatbot, it's not getting what you want. And then you literally have to type, hand me over to a human. It's not going to initiate the handover itself, right? Like I've never seen a chatbot that initiates. And it makes it hard for the organization and to kind of release that small feature. Where they could be going to is they could be releasing a very small scenario. Let's say within the banking, it might be, I don't know, find an account balance or part way you go sort of part way through deciding what account to open. I mean, there's like millions of scenarios that the bank would have to cover. But if you start with one simple scenario, and if you can get that handover from AI to human work really seamlessly, so the customer doesn't get frustrated, then you can get to that kind of culture of, okay, we'll release a little, we'll see what the customers like it, how they use it, what they use it for, is it useful, is it not useful, and then iterate and improve and be ready to switch something off. Like if it just does not work, maybe AI is really like not a good use case for this particular scenario. So I think that test and learn, this test and learn mindset is not quite often not really available within large enterprises. But for the startups and for the medium-sized companies, they're more than willing to go and try something. Like I'll give you an example. So one of our clients is a small beauty salon, right? And they're more than happy to experiment, right? So they're more than happy to go with the voice bot and see how whether the customers like it or not. And they're more than happy to try out different models and try different tone of voice and trying different personas and personalities of the bots. And that basically means that over time they can learn and they can improve. And their bot has been live for about 7 months now. And I can confidently say that we actually gone through a number of iterations with them. And what the bot started off being, let's say, 7 months ago, and the bot now, they're quite different personality-wise, what sort of questions they handle, how they handle it, and how the customers react to them as well. So it's been quite interesting.
What are the main types of clients that you guys work with at the moment? Are you kind of across the board, small through to enterprise, or?
Most of our customers are enterprise because there are two advantages that enterprises have. One of the main advantages that enterprises have compared to small companies, like that small beauty business, is that the software, the CRM systems, and the billing systems, and all of the platforms that the enterprises use, they tend to have API access. So that basically means that we can build something outside of those systems that still integrates through those systems. Right? And that basically means that we don't have to rely on what the vendor builds. We can actually extend the functionality and create a really good customer and user experience. For small companies, that's quite often not the luxury that they have. Right? So they might be using software for their point of sale. They might be using another software for their marketing. They might be using another software for the, I don't know, telephony or customer support. And those software packages, most often than not, they don't expose the APIs. So essentially, they're closed garden. So when we work with them, so for example, this beauty business, even though we have an AI voice bot that can handle a lot of customer queries, the package that those guys use for bookings, to manage bookings, is a closed system, and it doesn't expose any APIs. So it doesn't matter how good our bot is, it can't actually, right now, it can't make bookings because the software does not provide the APIs for us to integrate to. Right? And I guess what this vendor does is they're trying to safeguard their patch because they're building an AI voice bot, and they want to sell it to the businesses. And being a small business, you don't have the cloud to actually go and say, well, no. We're big users. We want the API access. We don't want to wait for you to build something. We actually want to build it external. So for that reason, I think enterprises do have advantage over small businesses because they have this API access and they have the financial resources to actually, and I guess the budgets to build something and host it and make it secure and not rely on the freelancer or a company sort of only does it like once every couple of months. So yeah, so most of our clients tend to be enterprise clients. They tend to have decent sized technology teams, and they usually bring us in to either help them deliver certain challenging pieces of work, or they bring us in because we have expertise in a particular area, in a particular domain, and kind of cross that bridge between the technical implementation and the business issue that they're trying to solve.
Got it. I'm going to go a little bit slightly off tangent. I checked out, what you guys do, your marketing and everything, and it seems like your view, correct me if I'm wrong, is that all this talk about AI, there's a lot of hype around it. Everyone thinks it's a silver bullet. It's give me some AI and it will just solve everything for me. And it seems that you guys are of the opinion that it's still just as hard, really, to build the right solutions and actually derive value with them. Is that true? Is that what you guys believe? And
so I don't. We don't view AI as just hype. It's a very powerful tool, but it is just a tool, and it should be one of the tools in your toolbox, so to speak. So you should use the appropriate tool for the appropriate problem. In other words, like if all you have is a hammer, then everything starts to look like a nail. And same thing probably with generative AI. Like if Gen AI is your answer to everything, then you start to try to use generative AI for problems that should really just be solved with just an integration or a ML model or a software that is deterministic in terms of the output. Right? Like for example, if you calculate in payroll, you should not be using Gen AI to calculate payroll because like it can hallucinate and it's not designed to be a mathematically, deterministic model just by design of it. Does it have a role to play in the payroll, overall payroll workflow and the journey? Absolutely, it can. So anything that maybe the explanations or the policies that you create around the payroll and how often the payroll runs, and what happens to what happens with your annual leave and like whatever other whatever other questions that the employees might have. like that might be the role for Gen AI, but you wouldn't use Gen AI for calculations. So that's one. So we don't think it's a hype, but we think it's one of the tools, and it needs to be used appropriately within a particular workflow. And the problem be the business problem that you're trying to solve. Is it a silver bullet? No, absolutely not. It has a role to play, and you need, or the business needs to be hyper aware of what the consequences are, or potentially consequences are of you using, Gen AI solution, right? And the consequences are that it's a non-deterministic model, and basically that means that you ask it 3 times, and it will not give you exact answer every time. Like it will give you slightly different answers. So you invest more into evaluating whether the answers are generally correct or fall within your guardrails. But you wouldn't expect it to behave the same like your payroll software, where for every given input, you always get the same output. Right? So it just, so I guess the AI has a role to play. It shouldn't be used as a silver bullet. Sometimes we see the companies kind of starting with AI being an answer before you really dig into like what is the actual problem that you're trying to solve. And it's only once you get through to what is the actual problem? Like, why are we using this? Like, what are we trying to achieve? Will it actually achieve what you think it's going to achieve? Then you get to a point like where you can decide, now I understand, all the different parts of Lego, and now we can assemble it in the right way so that overall it actually gives you what you need for the business rather than, just a tick box that you're using AI.
Yeah. And I guess that gets me onto the next thing I wanted to cover, which is we've talked about how we're really behind, particularly at that kind of larger organization level. How do we need to be thinking about how we implement AI so that we can catch up?
We encourage organizations to think of it in 4 kind of like 4 tracks. Let's say the top track or one track is your executive team, and they need to understand AI and actually need to understand not the specifics of what model you use, of what RAG database is. Like that's more implementation details, but they need to have a vision of why they use an AI and how the organization will change with AI, and whether they want to build an AI native organization in the future. We're assuming that AI will be a key, force or a key enabler for their organization. How does the organization change? So their role is to move the organization towards that vision and to have a view on what that vision is. The next kind of track or the next layer are the functional layers, functional leaders. So that's your, people responsible for customer care, or heads of compliance, or heads of digital. So basically all the functional areas that the typical organization has. And their role is to, again, look at the vision of what the organization will be in the future and guide or change their functional areas towards that future. And I think what we are finding, and I guess if you look at the companies like Block, for example, or a few other ones that have gone, through a similar through this transition recently, is they're essentially throwing out the traditional org structures. So they're moving away from the traditional functional areas, and they're moving towards more of a kind of like value streams. What business outcomes the company produces and how do you get to those outcomes, not in a traditional functional way, but how do you actually do it as AI? So functional leaders need to understand how the AI changes their function right now, and what's that structure is going to be in the future, and how they need to change their people, their functions to kind of align to that future. Then you have people leaders. So people leaders actually need to guide people through that journey. And, we're hearing all the time that AI will take people's jobs. AI will change jobs, and it will change jobs quite dramatically. But if you think about a a job or a role within a company, your role exists to produce some kind of an outcome, right? And that outcome helps the company to produce the overall business outcome. Right? So the overall business outcomes are still going to be the same. Like the nature of the business is probably still going to be the same. It just how do you get to those outcomes will be different. So people's roles will change on what sort of outcomes, because the outcomes kind of like are intermediate steps to get to that final one. So their jobs, we think, will change to maybe still go through the same steps or maybe not. But essentially, they will be more of the managers of AI or quality assurance of AI agents. So for people leaders, they need to understand the technology more, like what the capabilities of the technology is, how the humans kind of fit into it, what is important to get a human to, assess how you kind of include the human in the loop. So that's kind of like the third layer. And then the fourth layer are the actual people on the ground. And they need to be enabled. They need to understand how the AI tools actually work. Not everyone needs to be a vibe coder, but at the same time, I have seen quite a few business people that are now capable, given the right tools, to automate a lot of the things that are currently doing, in spreadsheets. And a lot of companies still run on spreadsheets. It's amazing. Like sometimes you get into a large enterprise and half of the enterprise is running on Excel, which is shocking. So I think that's what the companies really need to establish is they need to recognize that there are different groups of people within the company and they need different things. They need to understand different things when it comes to AI. And if the company kind of puts the support in place, for those different groups of people to get to that, target state or to get the right level of understanding, I think that will help us move faster. Because at the moment, the reasons why a lot of organizations move slow is because the decision making is slow. Like it takes ages to make decisions, takes lots of meetings, takes a lot of convincing to do. And I think that's one of the major contributors to us, not moving as fast as we could be.
Mm. Do you think there's also some element of competition to this? Because like I know I also speak to quite a lot of businesses who they're like small to medium size and they want to implement AI. And there's there's a lot of examples, people I've been speaking with for a year and they still haven't done anything. And uh, I imagine in these other countries, like in Russia, China, US, there's probably more drive for like beating your competition, right? Like you want to become a competitive company, but for some reason, a lot of companies here, it's like that. It's like it's not as competitive. Maybe I'm not sure. Do you think that's an element?
I think there's, if you look at countries like Russia and China, they say that there is a saying that necessity is the mother of all inventions. So because those countries actually had external limitations put on them, they actually had to come up with different ways to tackle those limitations, right? That we are just starting to get across, or that we're just starting to encounter. They also have different scale. And I think we scale in Australia, Australia is a smaller country compared to, let's say, China or US or Russia. And because it's a smaller scale, we don't encounter scaling issues as quickly as those countries did. Right? Like, for example, using frontier models is actually quite an expensive exercise. Right? But you only start to see the cost once you start to scale. Because if you're running an experiment for 100 customers, maybe 200 customers, the cost is high, but it's not astronomical. Like you're talking thousands of dollars, you're not talking millions. If you start to scale it to millions of customers, right, and to like millions of interactions, then that scale, that cost becomes your burning issue. So I think those countries kind of going through that scaling much faster because the population is much bigger, and they were more aggressive probably in rolling those solutions out. So they kind of had to scale it out much faster. Yeah. So I think it's the necessity. whether they encountered something with the external factor prevented them from doing something, and they had to come up with innovative ways or different ways to actually implement it.
Yeah. 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 Very interesting. Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there, but going back to your 4 layers, are there any clients or projects that you'd like to talk about where maybe like you've kind of implemented something in this way, or is there a particular project related to, I guess, your idea of helping companies become AI centric that you'd like to share, just to make it kind of concrete for people?
I probably won't be able to talk specifics about different companies, but one of them, I'll talk about the small one because it's actually more interesting. Like I mentioned, their risk appetite is very high. So it actually allows us to test a lot of ideas that we can offer to our larger companies, clients, or at least we almost like tried some things and we have, I guess, an educated guess of whether something works or doesn't work. So with them, I think that VoiceBot has been an interesting experience. And we found that the openness of customers to talk to AI is actually pretty high. If they genuinely know that AI is helping them solve their problem, and the experience, like the actual speaking voice, is human-like. And what I mean by human-like is that you can, it talks reasonably fast. It doesn't sound robotic. You can interrupt it. It can, speak multiple languages. It can understand you even if the environment that you're in is noisy, right? Or if you have a bit of an accent, like I do. So if the bot that the customers are talking to is responsive and you can interrupt it and you can really have a conversation with like a real human, the customers are very happy to use it. We've seen some customers that actually had a pleasant surprise, like they didn't actually believe that it was AI, and it took them some time to realize that they're talking to AI, which was interesting. And that customer has only a small number of callers who are asking to be transferred to a human, which was another surprise to us because we thought that, especially in that industry where the majority of their competitors are, have a human, we really thought, and initially there was a thought that there will be more customers asking to be transferred to a human. What is also interesting is that like once you have the transfer from a bot to a human working seamlessly, or if you can give a customer a good explanation of why you can't transfer, them to a human. So, for example, the bot might say, all the calls are monitored by, by human master, but the master is now with the clients, so that's the reason why, the phone cannot be answered by a human. Like I'm trying to help here, but if I'm not helpful, then, I'll take a message and I'll pass it on to the team. The interesting thing so the trust is quite high. What we also saw that the bot doesn't need to pretend that the bot is a human, but also it doesn't need to be too upfront to say that it's AI or too apologetic that if it's AI. And we actually saw that if the bot is upfront and says, hello, you're talking to AI, voice agent or voice receptionist, the percentage of people who want to be connected to a human actually goes higher. Because I think there's still a perception within customers or the general population is that AI is not good enough. And they kind of been burned by the bad experiences of chatbots. So if they know upfront that they're talking to AI, they're more likely to be, to want to talk to a human. But if you don't say, like you basically say, well, thank you for calling. How can I help you? And the bot actually tries to help a person. Very rarely we saw a dead end to that conversation where the human kind of gets frustrated because the bot is able to hand over, to a human or take a message or to switch them to another channel, before the customer gets to that frustrated point. So it's been so as a use case, I think it's a really interesting one. We have other clients that we implement AI solutions for their customer support, and that's working really well. We have solutions that we implemented in the contact center, and we use AI to understand the sentiment of calls and to use it for performance training of the agents, and provide kind of training or provide in-place guidance for the people on the call. But a lot of the stuff is hidden. So I think to kind of make it real for people, maybe to your listeners, I think the things that we're able to do with the small clients in a kind of like low risk or high risk environment is something that they can probably like really kind of take and use it for the for the work that they're doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, voice agents are a really interesting one. There's still a lot of people who are they want to implement them, that they're very hesitant. They're thinking, what will the customers think? What would you say to a company like that? Like, how would you advise them?
A/B testing is great. And what you can do until you actually try, you don't know. You're really guessing. If the customers value, so if you look at the customer experience and you look at the reasons why the customers contact you, you as a company, they're contacting you either wanting to do business with you, so purchase something from you or want to get a service from you, or they're contacting you because there is an issue. And the issue obviously falls into, there's some issues that are non-urgent and they can probably do it themselves online, just for whatever reason they're calling. And there are some issues that are obviously really complicated, does need a human, it's not something the customer can do themselves, so they are unsure on how to do themselves. If you try to implement everything for that, let's say the customer support, it is very hard, and it's most likely the customer will get frustrated, and the customer will kind of think that you're doing it because you want to save costs and you're not like they're not important to you. But if you look at the current customer experience, and let's say the customer needs to call you, needs to be for 10 minutes on hold, then they explain, what their issue is to someone, and let's say the call gets disconnected, and they have to call back again, wait another for 10 minutes, and they have to explain it again, right? That customer experience is not great. So if you're offering them a different experience that allows them to solve their issue much, much faster, or saves their time where the bot can kind of get enough details from them and they pass it on to the human who then calls them back with all the information and they don't have to repeat themselves. So in other words, like you're actually providing a faster experience to a customer, for a subset of their issues. And this way you kind of free up the rest of the agents. So if they do have a complicated issue, they don't have to wait for 10 minutes, on a call. So start small. You don't have to roll it out to all of your customers. Maybe roll it out to 10%, to start with, maybe even like 5% of your customer base. Within that 5%, you can also do A/B testing, right? You can experiment with, like, should it be a male voice or a female voice? Should it be different, persona based on who the caller is? Let's say if it's a female calling in, should it be the female bot that answers? Versus like if it's a male calling, should it be the male voice? Does it fit within the persona of your company, right? Like if you're if you're a beauty business and your target market is all females, then having male voice answer, that's kind of like out of place. So you wouldn't necessarily do it. But you could experiment with older voice, younger voice, and see whether it actually makes a difference to the customers. Quite often it doesn't. Quite often, like if the customer calls and they need to, update their credit card details because their credit card expired, they really couldn't care less whether they're talking to male, female, English accent or American accent or no accent at all, as long as they get their thing done in as fast as possible time. Right? So start with a small subset of customers. you can experiment with different types of bots. You can experiment with how fast you hand over to a human. And then you look at the metrics. I think metrics is one of the most important things, like when companies rolling out, I guess, any changes to their contact center or customer center. Like how are you measuring success? Is it the number of people that, call back? Like do they hang up as soon as they hear the bot and they call back? Maybe that's has their issue been resolved? What's the abandon rate? So you kind of if you know what the metrics are, and you can clearly compare those metrics to your current experience, then, as a company, you can decide are you providing a better experience or you're providing a worse experience? And if it's a worse experience, well, you can always, no harm done. Just go back to how you were doing it before.
Yeah. Excellent answer. And is that where you're seeing the most ROI right now? Because a lot of people, I'm sure you see it all the time. They're saying, "Oh, I've been trying AI for ages. Like, where's the actual return here?" Are you seeing it mostly in this kind of customer service, customer support area, or are there any other spots?
No, I'd probably say if the company is just starting on the AI journey, then internal use cases would actually give them much higher value, return on investment. And it's looking at the workflows that the company has, the internal workflows, and seeing whether where AI can actually speed up those workflows. Again, the ones that get most benefit are the ones that are not looking at the workflow just within one role, but the ones that are actually looking at the workflows across the whole function. Right. So let's say if you take, I'll take HR as an example. Right. So HR, most companies have an HR department that helps hiring managers, and you'd probably be familiar with it. Helps hiring managers hire staff. And the way it typically works is you have a hiring manager, let's say within IT. So let's say I'm a tech, engineering manager. I need to hire a new developer. So I go to my internal HR recruitment team, and I have to give them, or maybe they'll give me the position description. They'll, write a job description that I have to review and kind of input into. Then they will go and advertise on Seek, LinkedIn, whatever. Then, the applicants will start to come in. They do this initial review. They give it to the engineering manager. The engineering manager then has to do their review, right? And you know how the whole process kind of works, right? So if you look at the individual steps that an internal recruiter does, then you could say, well, there's a position description, so you can use AI to draft it. Great. You can use AI to create a job description. Fantastic. That's good as well, right? You can also use AI to look at the incoming resumes and assess it against the position description, right? And maybe write a brief. Great. But if you start looking at the end-to-end process, and your end-to-end process starts from when the engineering manager reaches out to the internal recruitment team, and it sort of ends when the engineering manager has the short list of candidates, then you could potentially automate most of that steps, right? So it's the engineering manager could use your AI tool to create a position description, a job description, and get it graded, and get it, get the market salary kind of bands assigned. You could use AI to automatically post it. You could, that's doable. You could use AI to assess the incoming applicants and to look at the resumes, right? You could even use AI to do this initial screening interview of, here's 5 questions that the engineering manager wants to ask. Great. We'll have a bot that calls the candidate and goes through those 5 questions. And as long as you frame it right, as long as you frame it as it will help the candidate to, present kind of to not waste their time by meeting with an engineering manager and kind of engineering manager asking them all those questions. You might as well kind of automate it. So a lot of those steps could be automated end to end, and the company will get more benefit because then the internal recruitment team could focus more on, what's where does this role actually fit? What's the future vision for this engineering manager in terms of the growing their team? Like, what's the skill set? Like, what is it that we're looking for? What's the culture fit, right? Will this person be, will this person uplift the capability rather than just be, another bum in the seat? So you literally have to look at, what do the internal recruiters do today and what they could be doing that AI is not going to be able to do, and kind of like offload more of the mundane sort of admin tasks onto AI and enable the ultimate customer, which is the engineering manager in this case, to do most of the things themselves.
Got it. So the quickest wins for most companies with the best ROI would be look at your internal workflows, map them out, and just see where you can put AI there first before doing anything fancy.
Or ask whether your workflow should change. Because the workflow was designed, with humans in mind, and it was probably designed some time ago. So is there a different way, a better way of doing things now with AI? So don't try to automate the existing workflow. Kind of like essentially start fresh and look at, well, what's the outcome that you're trying to achieve? And can you achieve that outcome in a different way? And does AI actually help you do it?
Yeah. And I guess that's the hard version.
That's the hard
Reimagining.
version. There is no easy. Yes. I guess it's easier for medium-sized companies, to kind of not throw everything out and start again, but because the number of people that you have to change and the number of processes that you have to change is smaller, so that you are able to kind of change it faster. The larger the company becomes, the harder it is to change multiple moving parts. You have to start with individual functional areas and kind of make a change there, and then gradually kind of, change it across the whole company. But you need the directive from the top. So obviously your executives and your board needs to have the mandate and needs to have put the objectives on the company to change. And they need to be clear on why they're doing it. Like, is it because of the cost? Is it because of the potential growth opportunities? And what we're seeing is AI is a really good growth opportunity. Like, if you look at it from a more cost reduction perspective, it doesn't give you as much benefits, I guess, in its current form. So yes, you kind of need the directive from the top, and you need to have enough of the empowerment at the bottom, so to speak. And you need to empower your AI advocates, accelerators, ambassadors, whatever you call them. It's people who are within the business, like own the tools, provide them support, let them run with it. Don't kind of slow them down. Yeah.
What do you guys think of agentic engineering? A lot of companies are kind of, there's a lot of talk about it. Some people are saying that it's a bit kind of fantastical, like it's not, that effective. You need a lot of human in the loop, and they're not capable of that much. But then you've got other people who've, they've implemented fully agentic workflows and systems. Where do you guys sit? Is that something you're into?
All our developers use AI, and we use agentic development. What we really encouraging people to think about is, don't think of, if you think about the product development lifecycle, and what I mean by that is when a business, let's say someone in the business has an idea of doing something either within the product or with the business, change, that will have a benefit to the business. So going from that idea to code in production, that's the full product development lifecycle, right? So you have an idea, you need to kind of come up with a bit of a feasibility. You need to find out, is it going to be desirable by customers? Like, what's the customer target? How many customers are going to pick up? And then you kind of get into, what exactly you're building, what features really need to be built, like what widgets you're actually building. And only then you get into coding, right? And then once you're done with coding, you need to do testing, and then you need to deploy it. So within the overall product development lifecycle, coding is actually a pretty small component. and it's not a cheap component because obviously a lot of people working on it. But what we're working on now is rolling out the full agentic product development lifecycle rather than just coding. So it's how you actually have the product manager, someone in the business, to articulate what the idea is and write it up as a business case or like a mini, product definition documents. Like, what is that idea? And we're developing AI agents to help business people to kind of think through what those ideas are, or like how do you actually articulate what the idea is, what's the potential target market, how big this idea could be, like what's the feasibility or viability or desirability of that product, creating prototype, passing it, looking at the customers, like what the customer feedback is going to be. So all those functions can now be implemented as AI agents that help the product manager and the user experience designer and the compliance and the marketing teams to move faster through those ideas. And I guess what we're going to see in the future, it might be that your agents, you've got the AI agents that are constantly scanning what your competitors are doing, what your customers are doing, what they're saying, both online and when they're calling you, looking at your CRM, looking at what's like the customers likely to churn or what else they're doing. So have agents constantly identifying what the opportunities are. Potentially have agents deciding, actually going through this opportunity to do a bit of estimation and decide whether that's feasible or desirable, and maybe discounting some ideas that are not. And then the ones that are, have legs in them, get humans to actually start to work with the agents to do it. So again, human in the loop is important. We kind of see humans becoming more of the orchestrators, managers of agents, and the decision makers, right? And AI agents doing more and more of that, the grunt work that currently you have to have humans do. So the ability, so it's kind of like what we see is, agentic is absolutely, agentic product development is absolutely possible. We're working on it, so it's not like it's a dream and one day it will happen. A lot of it is possible now, and it's just a matter of companies willing to to invest and get their people onto that journey.
Awesome. I know we've kind of hit the time limit now. Did you want to finish up? Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that I should have asked you about?
No, I think we've covered quite a bit. I think probably just as a way to wrap up, AI implementations are not a start and stop types of projects. They really should be thought of as an ongoing program of work that is becoming part of your or part of the organization way of doing things. And that's where, it's for a couple of reasons. One is the technology changes really fast, and what wasn't possible even a month ago is now becoming possible. So that's reason one. And as the speed of the technology change allows your company to change faster, and you kind of have this appetite for constant change, then you're able to build organization that is capable of reacting much faster and then even becoming more proactive. And change is going to be the constant, right? So don't think of AI projects as a traditional project where you implement a new CRM, you move everyone across to it, and then you're done. It's almost like an ongoing living thing, at least for the next, for the foreseeable future. That's probably our wrapping thoughts.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'd love to keep talking. I could probably ask you like 100 more questions. I know you're a very busy man and you've got a lot to do. So yeah. we can wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Evgueni, for your time today. I know you're really busy, and you've shared a lot of little nuggets with us there today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on, and maybe we'll do it again sometime in the future.
I hope so. I've got a lot more questions to ask, but I appreciate it. And if anyone's still watching now, thank you very much for coming along the journey with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All
Bye.
right. See ya. Bye.